Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Bowtie Conversation community known as the Bowtie Convo. And I'm your host, Dr. Bowtie Todd. We are excited to come back together for another conversation and continue our mission, seeking to create spaces for all humans to belong and thrive together, one Bowtie Convo at a time. To continue our learning series, today's Bowtie Combo will focus on a conversation with old white men about race and inclusion. Before we begin, a friendly reminder, the Bowtie Combo community has simple rules for engagement to have an effective dialogue the Bowtie way. It is in the way of my personal favorite acronym, the Bowtie. And of course, if this is your first time of us discussing and talking together, I want to share it with you. And so the acronym, the first letter of Bowtie stands for B. Be mentally present throughout this conversation. That's what we ask for. The next letter of Bowtie is O, open to new ideas. So we ask you to have an open mind and open heart. The next letter is W, willingness to show respect and own your own truth and share your story. Well, my friends, if you wear bow ties, sometimes you may see the hardest part or challenging part of a bow tie is usually just not in the middle. A lot of individuals say it's really challenging. And I've seen that sometimes a challenge of conversations today. The TIE, how do you tie it together? And I would tell you, my friends, is that our hope is that you be mentally present, you're open, but most importantly, that you engage, unravel, connect, and tie it together and leave this conversation today better than you came in. So we are live on Zoom and Facebook. So feel free to utilize the chat feature to introduce yourself and tell us where you're tuning in from. Since we are live on Facebook, feel free to reshare the video, host a watch party, and most importantly, share your comments. Please note, by the end of the conversation tonight, we will have our final portion for Q&A for our panelists. So at any time, feel free to submit your questions for our panel. So let's get started and meet our all-star panel. And if I can ask our panelists, if you can come in and let our viewers know who you are, tell us a little bit about yourself, and we're going to start with my friend Jeffrey.
Thank you, Todd, and hi, everyone out there in the listening and viewing world. I don't know, usually when I start out, I say it's a privilege to be here. I don't know if it's a privilege tonight to be an old white guy, but it's great to be here. My name is Jeffry Cadorette. Professionally, I'm a physical therapist by profession, the first 25 years of my career. That's a predominantly female profession, so in my practice, we had 55 of us and only 5 of us were men. So much of my professional life, I was in the minority. I'm a commercial real estate broker now. I'm immediate past director on the Rotary International Board of Directors, and I have a twin sister, Joyce, and we went to school together all the way up through master's degree. And that certainly gave me an interesting perspective growing up, having a twin sister. So it's a pleasure to be here, and it's an honor to be here with my fellow panelists.
Well, thank you so much, Jeffrey. And by the way, I have 2 sets of twin brothers, so I understand the twinnies in the family. You're a twin yourself. Thank you for being with us. Now we're going to go over to Mike. Can you let the world know who you are and a little bit about yourself?
Thank you, Todd. This old white man parachuted down to earth in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and my family was first-generation Italian. So I'm an Italian American. From that experience, I was immersed in Black culture, as fate would have it. The best job I ever had was in an R&B club when 15 to 18, cleaning out dressing rooms, and I caught top name entertainment on the way up: The Temptations, Marvin Gaye, Jimi Hendrix, and the likes. And then from there, I went to Penn State and Georgetown in DC. From there, I taught at a historically Black university in Maryland. And from there, I went to Baltimore and taught, and then I did corporate stints in consulting and high tech. So currently, I'm at JB Hunt, And my passion and love is organizational change management. And I've been doing that for 40 years.
Wow. Okay, I cannot wait to unpack your experience working at a historically Black college. So I'm definitely going to want to engage a little bit more there later. Thank you for being here. Now we're going to go over to Paul. Paul, tell us who you are and let the world know a little bit about yourself.
Do you like my bow tie, Todd? I'm Paul Reagan. I was raised in Fayetteville. I'm the second oldest of 13 children, and my experience becoming colorblind came from my mother, who simply did not see color, didn't see any kind of differences in people. I remember distinctly her carrying hot chocolate out to the people who were picking up the garbage on our small farm once a week. A Black man hauled our cattle and taught me how to tame horses. And it just seemed natural to me all the time that people were people. So I credit that to my mother. I left high school and went into the Marine Corps and got to visit Vietnam. Came back and went to college and have worked for a company for a total of 3 months. I describe myself as being unable to take direction. So I've always been an entrepreneur and I've had multiple businesses.
Wow, 13 kids. Okay, once again, Sharon Lark's family there. And I do see that you went and added the bow tie for the bow tie conversation. So thank you, Paul, for breaking your whole self with your bow tie to the conversation. I appreciate you. Last but definitely not least, I want to go to my good friend, Charles. Charles, please let us know who you are and the world know a little bit more about yourself.
Oh, thank you, Todd. I'm so delighted to be part of the bow tie community this afternoon. So thank you for that. Like Paul, I grew up here in Fayetteville, went through school, got a couple of degrees here, went off to the University of Georgia, and had an academic career for a time, and then left academe for the real world, as they say, and focused on evaluation research, I guess would be the broadest way to describe that. So I lived in Washington, D.C. for almost 30 years and moved back to my hometown to care for my parents with my wife, Sharon. We raised 3 kids, and we're still at that. So happy to be here.
Well, I know Miss Sharon is watching us tonight, and or she may be there. I cannot wait to. Sharon's a great friend of mine as well, and I am just so happy to have you here, Charles. All of you all. Most importantly, the opportunity just to connect with 4 exceptional gentlemen and explore your perspective. So let's go ahead and get started with the conversation. And I would like to start with some foundational terms. What does the words diversity, equity, and inclusion means to you? Anyone? I'll just open that up the floor. Let's just start building on some common vocabulary in your perspective.
I'll take I'm on mute. I'll take a shot, Todd. To me, it means leveling the playing field. And forgive me for the sports metaphor, but I mean, what I see is that some people get to play in the stadium, some people get to play in the Little League field, and some people get to play in the sandlot. And to me, everyone should be playing on the same field. The playing field ought to be leveled. So that's partly what it means to me, leveling the playing field so that we don't have all of this inequity, if you will, in where people are allowed to play and work.
Okay, thank you for that. Anyone else want to expound or give you your perspective or a little bit more? Mike?
Well, a lot of people talk diversity and then inclusion. I reverse it, inclusion and then diversity. There have been a couple heroes of mine that because of inclusion changed everything. there was a heart surgeon at John Hopkins, Vivian Thomas, who never got beyond the rank of janitor, yet trained all the heart surgeons in the 50s. And he was included because a doctor knew how talented he was and would not transfer to Hopkins from Vanderbilt unless Vivian could be there. USC played the University of Alabama in 1970, and there was a running back named Sam Bam Cunningham that was included in USC and ran all over the University of Alabama, and immediately the SEC changed. And then there was a guy who was invited to a dinner from Bobby Kennedy. Jerome Smith, he was in his 20s because Bobby wanted to learn about race relations, and everybody was prim and proper at the dinner, all the black leaders, and Jerome tore into Bobby Kennedy and said that he was beaten in the South and the Kennedys didn't know what the hell they were talking about. And due to Jerome, he changed Bobby that night, and Bobby changed John, and John changed his whole racial policy. In every one of those cases, inclusivity, and it was bumpy initially, and it was not done by high-profile leaders, but by bold, low-profile people with courage, changed the world, starting with inclusivity, and then it created massive diversity.
Wow, what a lens. I mean, well, that's a time. I wish I can go back and have some conversations during that time. And speaking of time, I would love to get Charles or Paul your reaction around recent events. So we're talking more about inclusivity and equity, and I love what Jeffrey was saying, trying to really level the playing field. And we all understand that people show up very differently based on so many factors. And so thinking about the reactions to the Black Lives Matter movement, so of course the deaths and social injustice that's happening in the Black community. Charles, any thoughts or perspective of your response and reaction of what are we still dealing with today, specifically around the Black community?
Well, it's Todd, as we all know, I think recently there's been a lot more agony and pain inflicted upon Black people at the hands of white authority. And this is, just another blip in a 400-year history, of course, in some ways. But this time, I think I see something different. And I have to say, first that I am so proud of young Black people going out into the street to register their objections to this oppression and to insist that now is the time for change. This is at risk of their lives in more than one way, as we know. So I want to applaud that. And for white people, I want to say, where you guys been? Where have you been all this time? Our response to things gets driven, I guess, by kind of funny things. But I have to say, was it really necessary that we have conclusive video evidence before we could, believe a Black man who says the police are not only discriminating against me, but they're killing me. I can't breathe. It's sometimes, really discouraging when you look at how white people have responded historically, and this need for independent verification in order to believe Black people is something that I want to challenge all of us old white guys, as well as all the rest of you white people out there, to try to find out how we can move beyond that. We have to have a certain amount of trust, I think, in what other people's experiences are. And we have to listen more. So when Black people tell us that, you know, the police are corrupt, I think we have to listen to that very carefully. And when they tell us that they were denied a job, you know, that they were denied the job interview, that they were denied the job posting, that they were denied the tip, that a good job was about to open up, you know, I think we have to believe that. And when they tell us that the education that they received in their school, you know, disadvantaged them relative to us old white guys and all the rest of generally white people, then I think we have to pay attention to that. And it's time that we not only register our protest to the, you know, these acts of discrimination that have held an entire people back for 400 years, and it's time that we try to make structural changes, that we try to change the systemic racism that has perpetuated this place that we find ourselves in. So I'm proud of all of the people, white, Black, brown, and everything in between, that have stood up in all the ways they've found to do that, to register their voices against the kinds of problems that we've witnessed, not just this past 6 months, but since 1619.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing that perspective, Paul. I would love to get your perspective and weigh in on this. Following Charles talking about the voice and how people are showing up with their voice. Talk to us a little bit about your perspective with the movement, or what is the voice of a white male in this movement? If you have any response to that. Uh-oh, Paul, I think you're on mute, so I'm going to try to unmute you. I want you to be in the bow tie conversation. There you go.
All right. Perspective, I guess, is micro as opposed to macro, in that because I was raised colorblind, as I call it, I have interacted with people my whole life that way. And I think if I have something that I need to do over again, it is to be more active in voicing the things that Charles brought up. Stepping to the street to say, you know, what I have watched friends experience is not right. I've probably sidelined myself too much. Being self-reflective in that sense. My actions tend to be, like I said, micro, so I have friends of all races, but the big divide that I see more than anything else is an economic divide. What's unfair is that I see people of color on the lower end of the economics, where they're more disadvantaged and easier to take advantage of.
Yeah, I definitely appreciate that perspective, and really talking about something on a macro level here. And I know we're talking about race and inclusion, and I definitely want to come back to the perspective of continuing to unpack the movement of Black lives and how we can continue to have dialogue there. But we also, talking about recent events, we just saw that the Supreme Court put out the decision around gay rights in the workplace. Any perspective or reflection on that we are still fighting for protection of all people in employment, et cetera? Because I think you were saying earlier, Charles, about people of color, not getting the job opportunities, and we can talk about intersectionality and all those things, but any reaction from the panelists from the recent announcement of the gay rights protection in the workplace?
Todd, I'll take a shot. You and I have spoken about this before. My younger sister has been with her partner Janice for 42 years. And so from a very young age, that was just natural to me. And she's one of the fortunate ones, because not only was she a gay woman when it wasn't fashionable and when it really was hard, but she rose in corporate America to be the North American president of Drake Beam & Moore, an international human resources consulting company. So to be a gay woman who lived in North Carolina, which is a whole nother story, a little conservative, I guess, for you folks from Fayetteville. So my perspective has always been very accepting because of my sister, because I just lived most of my life thinking that's normal. I think that the Supreme Court ruling got it right.
Well, in talking about getting it right, and then, what I'm hearing so far is like everyone experienced, really kind of help you form your lens, of course, where you at today, talking about your sister, Paul, talking about how you was raised by your mother, Mike, how you was raised and explore a lot of those cultures growing up. Understanding our experiences shape our perspective. I'm curious to know, was there a moment in your life you recall that encouraged your openness to learn about race or differences around identities? And how did you move from what the world told you in your generation, good or bad, to embracing people of all differences and abilities today from various backgrounds? Mike, I will start with you. I'll be interested to know your perspective.
That's a great question, and I had two game-changing moments for me. One, I did not even understand what it meant till I got older. I went to a Catholic school, and there was a Army base near that Catholic school, and we had 8 black kids in the school, and the black kids were officers' children. They were great students, impeccably dressed, just grade A. And one of the events, one day there was a knock at the door in my neighborhood, and there was a black woman at the door and said, "Son, can I talk to your mother, please?" And I said, "Sure." So I got, my mother's Italian, off the boat. And she said, "We just threw a birthday party for my daughter and nobody came. Can you please have your daughter attend my daughter's birthday party?" And my mother slammed the door on her face. Now, I was young, but I'll never forget the look on that mother's face. And it haunted me. And I talked to my mother about it, and we worked it out. And just what can happen as a result of racism to children, that was driven home very concretely to me. Another thing, I was walking in a park one day, and a bunch of black kids asked me to play football with them, and I played football, and they kicked the ball off, and I got it, and I'm running, and a guy grabs me and starts choking me, and I forgot that I was in an all-black environment, and I started punching the guy, and we started fighting, and then I thought, what am I doing? But my teammates, my black teammates, came to my defense, and they were two pivotal moments in my life that said, because one of the panelists was saying, he was raised to not be a racist. We had the Klan burning crosses in front of our house as Italians in Pennsylvania. Yes, Pennsylvania. And yet I was taught that Jews were going to take my money and blacks were going to knife me. So that was my orientation as a child in a blue-collar Italian family. So those two events really changed my life. Our grocer was a guy named Abe Cohen, who always bailed my family out when we needed groceries. So there was logical inconsistencies between what I was being told at home and what I was experiencing.
Wow, thank you for sharing. Anyone else want to share their perspective or moment? Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Yeah, I mean, it was an era, and most of us on this panel, because we are the old white guys. So I had a different experience growing up because I grew up in a small town in Western Massachusetts, and only like 3% of the population was Black or African American, and so I lived in a very sterile, homogenous type environment. And then people started getting assassinated. John Kennedy, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X. And then I was going away to college, and there was some required reading because Newark was on fire, and Detroit was on fire, and Watts was on fire. And that's what, and it was like an eye-opening event to me, because I grew up not having a whole lot of experience with other than white people. And then all of a sudden, everything blew up. Not unlike things are blowing up now, in a different way. But I mean, when you think back on that time of the Vietnam War and the assassinations and the civil rights riots and cities on fire, and that to me opened my eyes and allowed me to start to take a deeper dive into what's going on.
Wow. And you know, we think about, you know, how we was raised and the perception that we have with our, you know, of people of color, of Black people, of differences, and then where we're at today. I would say as old white men, but I am curious to know, do white men, you know, because once again, I am not white, do white men talk about these issues with each other inside their homes or socially? What does that look like from a family dynamics? Knowing that, you know, you guys travel around, you guys are educated, you guys have seen the world, and then coming and bringing those experiences back to your family. Specifically, we can talk from, you know, white men in your family, or just in general. What are the conversations like, especially around race?
I'll take that initially. At least we're all different. We have all different family situations, but in my family circles and my social circles, we don't sit and talk about race. We talk about politics initially, and then race invariably gets dragged into it in a very big way. So you start off with red-blue politics, and then next thing you know, you're talking Black Lives Matter. You're talking potential racism with the police. You're talking about the problems in the cities. And then it gets into racial assumptions and debates, at least from my end.
Thank you for sharing that. Anyone else? How's these dynamics within your families, or the type of conversations that you all have?
You know, Todd, I think, and Mike talked about red and blue, and unfortunately the conversation has gotten very politicized here in our country. I know that we have people from outside of the US listening in, but to me anymore, it's not the conversation, it's the listening. People aren't listening to each other. They're talking at each other, but they're not listening to each other. That to me is not a conversation. And so if that conversation comes up in my world, in my current world, and it's hard because actually, I don't know what this is.
Paul, there we go.
Wow, I thought there was a fire alarm, and I was just about to leave the building. I wish we could have the conversations. I wish that people would have conversations and not talk at each other. That's what I wish. And so when and it's hard in this global pandemic because we're not getting together in groups to talk. But in the times when I have, what I could encourage people to do is listen. You may never agree, but stop yelling at each other and start listening.
Thank you for that. Listening is so important. Charles, I wanted to get your perspective on this, the conversation of race in the household, et cetera.
Race in the household. I don't have that much family left, I guess, in a way. I could go back, you know, to the 50s and 60s and talk about that, but I'm not sure it's really worthwhile. We've been having conversation for a very long time. And I guess from my point of view, I don't know that there's that much more left to say. I think it's time to act and to, make some changes that count. And so, wear your mask, go vote, and let's effect change. I'm tired of indulging myself. I'm tired of indulging the argument with those who persist in being closed-minded in their views of race. And it, it raises my blood pressure and I get angry about it. So, for maybe just selfish reasons, if nothing else, I'm tired of talking about it with people that don't have some degree of openness to change. And I'm tired of, I'll tell you too, I have two black children. Two of my three black children, two of my three children are black. And I'm tired of seeing them have to bear the responsibility for coddling white people through history lessons and through guilt, trying to allay the guilt that some white people feel. And I'm tired of seeing them have to carry all that responsibility to salve the feelings, the hurt feelings of white people who don't think they're privileged, don't think they were ever privileged. So I don't know. I'm coming from maybe a little bit different place than most folks, most old white men, maybe. But it's it's important, I think, to talk when that's leading to something fruitful. But I think it's time for action, and I think it's time to motivate people to act. And so I think we have responsibility for taking our white friends that are sitting on the fence or saying maybe they'll sit this one out. People that you think, have a soul that is maybe ready to embrace other people, regardless of the color of, their skin, one tiny fragment of DNA and 100 different organs that we all have as humans. If you're ready to consider that you're responsible for this situation and start to act on that and talk with your leaders and your friends in your sphere of influence, then talk's great. But I'm in many ways tired of the discussion, if you will.
No, thank you for that. I think one of the biggest questions I continue to hear, especially that was posed for the panelists for this specific theme, around the ability to converse with other white men who does not have the same mindset as you all have, or come to the lens of today's lens as really trying to take action. Paul and panel, I'm interested to know, because as you know, the work of inclusion involves having everyone at the table. How do you engage other white men who may not share your point of view on race, equity, and inclusion? Paul, I'll start with you.
Let me step in, but I'm going to continue a bit from what Charles was saying. My family spans advanced degrees in college down to barely got out of high school. It spans off the chart red to off the chart blue, labor organizers to people who believe every one of the Trump statements. And so when I gather with my family, there is the opportunity for statements to be made that are offensive, that violate in one way or another. And what I have come to terms with recently is that I can speak up, and this, Charles, is taking action, but it is verbal action. I can speak up when one of them makes a statement that is offensive to a group, only because they are different, be it gay, be it women, be it color, be it economic. Statements will be made about Hispanics as well as people, Black people. And for me, it's simply the act of saying, guys, that's really not fair. Are you thinking about what you're saying? I'm not trying to make divisions within the family because I want to cling to the family. It's the closest unit I have, but I want to let them know where I stand and help them to see maybe that they're not being inclusive and that they're being offensive, and I'm taking offense to what they're saying.
Wow. So that, you know, that's skill to do that. I've definitely seen that in my work, having to be skilled to really have dialogue and not debate. And it is a fundamental difference there. And once again, going back to the question earlier I raised is, you know, you have individuals who come to the table. Most times they will come to the table if they don't see the topic at hand, right? They come into the table. Usually when you put this topic up, some people they're not going to engage. So I've learned how to ensure that topics and discussions are inclusive for everyone to feel a part of the discussion. But once someone gets to the table and someone's, you know, we hear this debate, especially about the Black Lives Matter movement, we shouldn't talk about that in service organizations. That's political. Keep politics out of our conversations. We're not here to do that at work. And so I'm curious to know any response from you all specifically around this issue of politics and social climate with around human rights, etc. Mike, do you want to give us your perspective?
As I said before, at least in my circles, let's take Black Lives Matter. Usually there's some political discussion, and I know you don't want to talk politics, but it's so, as Jeffrey said, it's so intense now that these discussions are being made. So it'll go something like this. I'll be at a family gathering and somebody will say, all lives matter. And I'll say, that's true, all lives matter. But I'm not seeing white people being choked on body cams with all the statistics. So that's all that Black Lives Matter is getting to, that it assumes all lives matter, but we've got to deal with these issues. And I know politics is a sensitive thing like religion and everything, but politics is inextricably linked to race these days and these topics like Black Lives Matter. And I just gave an example.
Thank you for that perspective.
You know, to piggyback off of what Charles said about action, I mean, clearly we need action, but what we've also seen and know from experience, from history, is that you cannot legislate behavior. You can write all the laws you want, you can change all the laws you want, and you cannot legislate behavior. So it's got to be both. It's got to be action, but the dialogue has to continue. I mean, I think one of the worst things out of this whole Black Lives Matter movement is that it would just fade away. I hope it just doesn't fade away. I hope that we have raised the platform significantly enough that the conversation and the dialogue continues, coupled with the action that needs to follow.
Thank you for that. Charles?
Yeah, I'm in a little bit different place. See, I think we can legislate behavior, and frankly, I don't care what people's attitudes are. Just get off my damn neck. And so I think, it's quite possible to legislate behavior, but then we have to enforce it. And what we've had is, I think just really an immoral situation, and very often an illegal situation going on in particularly our police departments. The police starting, in post-Reconstruction, well, blatantly before that, but post-Reconstruction, that's where the Klan ran. And I would just submit that, it's worth contemplating. If you have a corrupt culture, you're going to have to figure out how to clean that out and start over and build a different culture. And so I know that a lot of people think that, this is impossible, but Camden, New Jersey did a pretty good job of it. And it's worth taking a look at. And until, just on the Black Lives Matter thing, until Black Lives Matter, all lives do not matter. So you can say all lives matter, but it's simply not true until you can also say Black Lives Matter. So we have to, take advantage of this opportunity, which I think it's maybe once in a lifetime. Maybe you get a couple shots at it in a lifetime to actually make structural changes, to enforce behavioral changes, and now is the time to do that. I think if you change people's behavior, eventually their attitudes will come along behind that. So I'm just, I've just got a different theory, Jeffrey, of human behavior, and I'd like to see more concrete steps taken to legislate behavior and enforce it.
Along those lines, I'd also like to see Black Lives Matter expand beyond the police to include investments in education in the inner city. The town I grew up in, Harrisburg, I was so saddened. I was reading a report, 90% of the high school students failed proficiency. 90%. And that's the seat of the state government. My sister supports several schools as an autism counselor and was given the toughest kindergarten student one time to just work because of the environmental PTSD situation that great child was subjected to. So Black Lives Matter has got to go beyond the police. We've got to invest in education. I taught at a maximum security penitentiary in Maryland, and the one thing I walked away with, the good students used to tell me, it's like Monopoly. We all got to have $1,500 to start the game in educational units, and then let free enterprise take its course.
Wow. I think to your point, and really this collective whole and having this conversation and dialogue and then going into action, and shortly we're going to open it up for our Q&A, but I think another question and concern that we continue to hear, especially around ageism or just mindsets. Many times we hear young people may not join organizations because of the mindsets of older people not being open. Most times I hear older white men not being open. What about younger individuals who want to work with older generation on this topic? Any advice for them around having this cross-generational dialogue?
Well, I'll throw in on that. Don't trust anybody over 30. How's that?
Heard that before.
You've heard that before, haven't you? Well, I'll back off that a little bit and just say, that you shouldn't listen too much to your elders. After all, we're the ones that gave you these problems to solve. And so just bear that in mind as you go along. Now, having said that, you'll get more done, with a more inclusive and broader set of people involved than you will with only a subset of that group. So you need to do a couple of things, I think, young people. You need to first of all recognize that you might live longer than you're thinking you will right now, and so you need to take care of yourselves. You need to take care of your body and your mind and your soul, and kind of play it for the long run in a sense, but continue to be impatient while you're doing that. Without some impatience, I'm not sure that we'll ever really affect the kinds of changes that are needed to not only solve the problems in employment and job security and pay and education, but healthcare, your chances of living, three times the odds of dying from COVID right now for Black bodies as opposed to white bodies. And so it's systemic. It runs throughout the entire system. It's not just the police, it's in the education system. It's everywhere. So we have to do that. And then I guess my last advice and really plea to young people would be to try to look past our mistakes after you've learned the lessons that need to be made from them. We've made errors of commission and errors of omission along the way, and some of us are still capable of learning, I like to believe. So don't let ageism creep into your thoughts and actions too strongly, because many of us still want to be part of the change. So I don't know that constitutes sound advice, but at least it's a few ideas to consider.
If I could jump in there, I think what I heard, Charles, is that you're willing to listen to the younger generation, but you also would like to have them hear you. Am I correct?
Yes, with an emphasis more on old white men listening.
Yeah.
Than pontificating.
That means we have to ask questions, and they have to ask questions, and that equals the conversation, which is what Todd is affecting here. The art of the conversation has been lost to a great deal, and I know that I've watched Todd's skill develop in this area, making sure that people are able to converse so that the diversity, equity, and inclusion arrives also at the conversation. And I think if you can get to the conversation on that level, you can move beyond it so that things like Black Lives Matter and Native American Lives Matter become more inclusive and broad spectrum, and they change things like finance and policing and administration and education. I'll shut up.
Hey, that's the part of dialogue. We do not encourage you to shut up. We would like for you to speak. Just be respectful. I do want to open it up to our Q&A. We have several questions that we're going to try to unpack and get through. The first question, due to that we have a very global audience, we have people tuned in from all over today, Australia, all across, as we have seen. The question was raised: systemic racism shows up in many countries. Why is the response in the U.S. so much more drastic and violent?
I would guess it might have to do with our history of enslaving one group. I know there are other countries that practice that as well, but it built the economy of the South and affected the North the same way. and lasted for a long time. And I think that you build up a reservoir of resilience and resistance at the same time, and someday it pokes its head through just like a volcano.
Thank you for that response. And this was another great question, was what, of course, beyond the dialogue and education and talking, what is a concrete action that you all can suggest outside of the talking and dialogue that you want to raise to our audience about what to do to make this right?
Everybody picks their own way of trying to get out of neutral and do something. And in my case, I mentor African Americans in the business world to try to ensure that they get promoted and are more successful. So that's my little way of trying to help.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Concrete action?
Mine is to speak up in the face of somebody making a statement that is prejudicing any group at all, but speak up in a kind manner instead of shutting up.
Charles?
Yeah, I think we have to be race conscious. I do, and I think we have to educate ourselves, and I think and be respectful of people. If even if not all their behaviors comport with our ideas of what's proper and right. I think you have to broaden your friendships, and you need to do this in your own personal life, because you will find enrichment beyond your dreams if you can find a way to make friends that look different than you. And so then all the rules of being a good friend apply. And so I think that's opening the door to your education. If you can do that, you'll learn other perspectives. If you can find someone to look past the white privilege that's embedded in your naivete, in your own assumptions and your lack of understanding of things, if you can find people that are willing to overlook that and to still be your friend and to coach you along, the education that you get will open your eyes in a way that you'll appreciate for the rest of your life. But for me, I'll just come back to wear a mask and vote.
Thank you, Charles. Jeffrey?
I was going to say vote. What's one concrete action? Vote. And I know we've got a global audience here, and I'm speaking specifically about the U.S., but we've got to change the dialogue at the top and somehow get past this red-blue collision. I mean, I remember a time when red and blues used to talk to each other. I remember the time back in the Ronald Reagan days and Tip O'Neill when Democrats and Republicans could actually talk with one another. I don't see any of that happening right now. And so my concrete action, vote.
Thank you for that. And Paul, did you have you said, no, I actually heard when you say don't shut up, but I didn't know if that was something else that you wanted to add.
It was to speak up when you see something happening. But the other thing is there's a lot of room for learning how to converse again.
Yes,
somebody needs to get out and teach that, Todd.
I definitely think we definitely have opportunity for learning some of the fundamentals that to how to facilitate dialogue, especially around these difficult topics, etc. Here's another question for us: how have you all seen the largest impact in discussions with people of your generation? And do you think they can change their minds? Do you believe that individuals can change their mind, matter the age or background. We kind of talked through that a little bit earlier, but specifically that question was raised. Anyone has a perspective?
I'm very pessimistic about changing the minds of people my age. I'm very optimistic about dealing with younger minds.
Great perspective. Anyone else?
Yeah, I agree with Paul. I mean, I've talked to some people, had a conversation with some people that, you know, when you get to the bottom of the hole, stop digging. It's clear that they're just not going to change, that there's nothing you can say, nothing you can show them, no image that's going to change their mind. We all tend to concentrate on our weaknesses. I don't know what's going to happen to those people. Quite frankly, I don't care what's going to happen to those people. We need to concentrate on the people. As Paul said, some of the best conversations I have are with my kids who are in their 20s. I mean, they're ready. They're pushing us. So, yeah.
We're seeing a lot of children, how they're definitely changing parents' mindsets and beliefs, etc. This question was raised as well. How do you propose we address racism in predominantly white organizations? Great question.
That's a big silence out there.
Well, most organizations are predominantly white organizations, I guess would be my first observation. And so any kind of organizational change, you know, requires a plan for how to do it. And a lot of it does come down to leadership. So we need to identify the leaders in our organizations that are looking forward instead of trying to look back. And we need to have those conversations with those leaders and try to identify an action plan that can lead to different behaviors in the intake and exhaust systems that organizations have, and that affect the promotions system. So I think it's just organization in a way. It's just the same organizational development work that you would engage for any kind of organization. But we also, our public education system is under assault, and it's the public education system that builds common values and common beliefs and common understanding and a common sense of shared history. And so to me, it's really critical that we not just focus on kind of the top of what already exists now, that we quickly begin working at each age group through our educational systems to develop the kind of leadership that we all would aspire to practice ourselves.
Wow, thank you for that, Charles. And I will say, panelists, I would love to conclude with some of your final thoughts and reflection for today's brief conversation. It was a great conversation, but I do want to hear if anything you all want to share. It could be related to the topic or things you would like the viewers to walk away with. I'm going to go ahead and start off with Mike for your final thoughts and reflection.
We talked about the young and old interacting. We old folks don't really know the environment like the young folks do, but we can give historical points. Jeffrey talked about the 60s and the riots. We can share data points on how they differed from today so that young people can factor that into their calculus of decisions. We can see that we don't know this environment, but we can give some good historical data points.
Great point. Thank you for that, Mike. I'll go to Jeffrey.
Yeah, thanks, Todd. No, I'm good. I had no idea when you asked about being on a panel with old white men talking about race. It's been an enjoyable hour. Appreciate the opportunity to be included.
Thank you. Paul?
I have a takeaway that I'd like to do at my local Rotary Club. I would like to see us have 1 or 2 meetings with facilitated conversation on the topic. Maybe we know somebody who could help with that.
Maybe.
Maybe, just maybe. Last but not least, Charles.
Oh, Todd, all of you, it's been an honor to engage with you this afternoon. And Todd, I want to thank you for your leadership, your superb skills at negotiating a conversation with old white men.
No, the pleasure is mine. For our viewers who are watching, and some closing thoughts. I really hope our conversation today showed you that there's incredible opportunities of learning across the community. And we have allies across, especially, I would say, Black community. I believe everyone on this call is an ally. And we see that across the community and movement. So I encourage you all not to shy away from engaging white men of all backgrounds in the conversation. We didn't go through the panel and let everyone disclose their age, but I want people to understand that age is a number and maturity is a mindset. So some white men, some people of backgrounds may be open and some may not be open, but we will never know if we don't try. So I would like to thank the panelists today. This was more than a conversation. For me, it was a dream come true to bring you all together, who I consider my dad, my granddad, but most importantly, my friends. And unfortunately, due to the health of my great friend, who's also 80 plus, John Bravak, as well as Roy Brom, they couldn't make it to our conversation today. But I wanted you all to know I have incredible individuals in our community that's really helping progress and for us all in a place that I consider the right direction. But you all, panelists, you made today worth all the while. Like, I just love it, and I appreciate you so much. And everyone, thank you all for tuning in. Thank you for bow tying it together today and for listening. As we conclude, our next week topic is going to be powerful as well. So I would love for you to come back and join us in the discussion to talk with national leaders about dialogue around unseen communities, invisible diversity, and the intersectionality around indigenous community, disabilities, LGBTQ, poor, homeless, and so much more. So as we close, I ask the conversation doesn't stop here. Continue to bow tie combo in your own space and be good to yourself so you can be good to the world. Until next time, my friends, peace, love, and happiness. Thank you so much. Have a great night.